Buddy, we're going to finish up some media day quotes here. Hit us with the beats.
Let's talk about the journey back to the court for LaMarcus Aldridge, the new darling of the Locked On Nets podcast, one Patty Mills, and then the former darling, Nicolas Claxton, maybe seeing his role dramatically change as we head into a championship caliber season. It's the tidbits are titillating and tantalizing, my friend. Media day.
Yeah, some really interesting quotes from each of these guys who are going to see their seasons probably go in slightly different directions. We're going to get into it all, but first, theme music.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo.
All right, welcome back to the Locked On Nets podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Also streaming over there on YouTube where you can see Adam wearing an absolutely ridiculous hat. Thanks for making Locked On Nets your first listen of the day and the week. I'm Doug Norrie, owner-operator, DFSR.com. If you need projections for FanDuel and or DraftKings, NFL, NBA coming soon, head on over to DFSR.com. And that is Adam Armbrecht, who's covering the Brooklyn Nets, but also holding it down with his 0-3 Giants on the One Giant podcast with his boy Andy Mack. Buddy, how's it feel to at least cover one team that's going to actually win a lot?
Well, listen, the season's long, a lot of games ahead of us, some mistakes were made, and we'll correct those. Coach speak. It feels good, man, as media day wraps up and training camp's underway, and we've got preseason game number 1 on Sunday. Like, we're there. And by the way, I can say with fairly high level of confidence, the Nets are going to win a lot of games.
Oh, yeah. All right. Yeah, they're in training camp right now off in San Diego. We're getting some snippets here and there.
San Diego.
Watch Anchorman to know what that word means. So, yeah, we got getting some snippets from San Diego, just some workout stuff. You know, everything looks hunky-dory as well it should be. And we'll probably get more updates really as the season goes, or excuse me, as training camp goes on about statuses of every player, ahem, Kyrie Irving, to see what's going to end up happening with his status, as that stuff only seems to be ramping up around the NBA. We did want to take a look at a few other just guys that are either coming to the Nets or were briefly with the Nets, and what they had to say at Media Day earlier this week, because it was pretty, there was interviews with everybody. There's varying levels of interest around what people said. I'm interested in hearing what every Net player has to say. Some are just like, it's just a little bit more interesting than others. One of them was LaMarcus Aldridge, who I think after the way, that?
Interesting. Very interesting. Sorry.
Very interesting. No, I think after the way he ended his season so prematurely last year, where it looked like it was basically the end of his career, with a super scary heart condition that he'd always had a heart condition, but it was never ramped up to this level that he had to step away from the game. And now, just a few months, basically in the grand scheme of things, a few months later, he is back, not only in the basketball court, but actually going to have a pivotal role for what the Nets are going to do this year. And he had some really interesting things to say at Media Day.
Yeah, I liked it when you talk about what the Brooklyn Nets had hoped for him last season versus what happened, and then need to step away. We had highlighted about what Sean Marks had said, thinking, hey, convince me, right, that you want to come back and do this, because that's going to tell me, beyond the health piece of it, that this is something that you believe in and you want to do. Unfinished business got thrown around a lot from LaMarcus Aldridge, and also the role, I think, piece of this took it beyond foregone conclusion territory that, well, because he was with the Nets, obviously he would come back and play for the Nets again. It ties into role expectations, because LaMarcus Aldridge does not view himself as someone, who's washed. He thinks that he can still be an important piece to a championship team. And that's the way the Nets have represented him coming back and joining them again.
Yeah, they did that the first time around when it looked like he was going to be going to Miami. And then basically at the last second, it completely pivoted and he ended up on the Nets. And we always thought it was because promises were probably sort of made around what his role was going to be. And by the way, in his brief time, he looked more than competent about being on an NBA championship level team. I think was without a doubt. I don't think I think most fans thought, as rightfully they should have, oh, we really got something here with this guy. And then, but it was just so brief that it's easy to, this many months and so many games and playoff heartbreaking losses in between that, it's easy to forget what was happening with him. But the Nets clearly didn't. And, you mentioned the Marks thing, which is, again, just goes back to this organizational philosophy around, we've said it a million times, around stability and just having their priorities really in the right place, where Marks and Aldridge go back, like they've known each other before. So it was, they've had a relationship before on the court. And where Mark says, hey, dude, are you sure you want to do this? Like, this is, because it usually goes the other way. It's saying, come on, we could really need you. We really, we're gonna need your services here. You're gonna be really important. Where Marks sounds like it got to him on a human level and just said, hey, we're friends, we know each other. Is this the best decision for you and your family and your life and whatnot? And I guess when Aldridge was able to convince him that it was, that's actually where the tables turn. It really, and usually just you hear it going the other way.
What do you think is, to tie in a couple of Kevin Durant thoughts and takeaways from his media day, where he mentioned about, we have a lot of veteran talent. Like, that's kind of been the theme from media day when you bring in LMA and Patty Mills, we're going to get to, and obviously Millsap as well. But do you think that, in spite of the fact we didn't get this full sample size last year, so to speak, that KD, that Harden, that Kyrie looked around this roster? I mean, it's just triggered in my mind. Remember when Kyrie said a couple seasons ago, like, yeah, some guys will be here, some guys won't. That's kind of the deal. Most of those guys are not here anymore. And there's a lot of new guys now on this roster. How much do you think that plays into the way that Sean Marks approached this offseason as opposed to last offseason, and really understanding not just veteran talent, but veteran talent that still has real minutes left to give for a championship?
Yeah, I mean, these guys have to be able to play. No one's doing anyone any favors here. This is not, the Nets aren't taking on charity cases at this point, right?
So it's not anymore. Come on.
Right. And we always have, and great. And we talked about this the other day. It's like, we have this great example. Well, not great, but we have an example in DeAndre Jordan that said, we're not playing. There's not a sentimental factor around anything here. You have to be able to contribute. You have to have gas in the tank, so to speak, when it comes to championship level basketball. The people that were not seen as being able to have that are no longer with the team. And there's a group of guys they think have that now. You get a season to play it out. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, no, 100%. Yes, like shifting those gears a little bit to making sure you have that quality. The tie-in piece to LMA, though, to me is as well. Remember, when we got that little sample size, everyone got excited. There also was a sample size in there. There was a game sample where it was like, hey, this can also look a little bit muddy at times. Sure. LMA is where he is in his career. He is at his age. Do you think that LMA represents, it's not one-to-one, but is this an upgrade from the balance? And this, I think, another layup question for you, that balances this roster better than having DeAndre Jordan in that mix of, as we say, the five and everybody else, right? Well, LMA is in the five. This is an improvement for the Nets, whatever he's going to be able to give them.
Oh, 100%. It's like not even close. It's the fact that he can stretch the floor. This guy shot 37-ish% over the last 2 years from three at over three attempts per game. So,
and improved that significantly relative to his career.
Yeah, excuse me. Shot 80% for the Nets, but that was only on one attempt. Think
about that. I'm gonna light it up.
No, but this is a guy that can clearly stretch the court. The Nets would much rather have that than just a big body in the lane. Whenever you have guys that can kind of get to the rack, like most of the superstars the Nets have, it doesn't do them a lot of good to have guys that are going to clog the lane, because that's where you want your best players to operate anyway. So Aldridge definitely fits that bill. All these guys, by the way, are greatly improved around this system when the minutes aren't going to have to be super taxed. Like we saw diminishing returns on Blake last year when they just had to play him tons of minutes. Look, they had to do it, so it wasn't anyone's fault. They just don't want to. That's why there's been this, bringing in guys like Aldridge and Millsap and putting them with Blake, and we'll talk about Claxton a little later. But there's this idea about bringing all these guys in just because, it's nice to have a lot of these bodies around, so no one needs to have to play outsized minutes. So I don't think is Aldridge he's like the seventh best player in the team. We're not talking about a top 3 player on the team here. We're talking in terms of importance. He's, outside the top 5 right now, but it's still really important. So I think that there's clearly very much a role for him.
Oh yeah, exactly. And that's, as I say, to frame it as a layup is the idea of what he does. His natural skill set as a player just seems to very much fit in with what Kevin Durant and Harden and Kyrie are going to want to do on the court on a possession to possession basis. And then even more importantly, in a series kind of basis where having DeAndre Jordan and just label anybody, having Nicolas Claxton, right? Having any player in the 5 role for stretches that is limited with what they can do for you, then in turn, it does limit your superstars. It does put more pressure on them to create on their own, as opposed to be able to, all these guys can do it, but you like it when they can take off a few possessions and allow things to kind of organically happen, right? So that's the difference too about keeping the superstars as fluid and smooth and in rhythm as possible as well.
Yeah, and one difference with Aldridge, and then we'll move over to Patty Mills here in a second. But one difference with Aldridge that we've seen before and we will see again is the difference with him as compared to some of the other bigs that they had. Specifically Blake and obviously DeAndre, is that in certain situations you can just kind of give him the ball in a mismatch, like in the post, and just give you're talking about giving someone a possession off.
Yes,
he has the ability to kind of create his own shot in the post if he needs to.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're looking for just to lighten the load of scoring a little bit, he still has that in his bag. He's got that little turnaround. He's got the long arms. He gets that super extended release that he can ride. He doesn't get off the ground. He doesn't have hops, but he's so long that the ball gets released at such a high point that he actually can shoot over most defenders if he has them in a mismatch. And there's a place for that too, right? Even if it's not going to be space, it's saying, hey, if we don't want to just have to go to these guys in every possession, he has a scoring ability that really the other guys don't. And so, again, he's not going to take it beyond the arc and just kind of break someone down in dribbles, but he is more of a scorer than the other 2 guys. So yeah, there is a slightly different skill set than they're bigs, but he does stuff differently than Millsap and Blake Griffin too. All right, I want to get into possibly my new favorite net, Patty Mills, here in a second. First, got to talk to you about our friends over at Sleeper. If you've been playing fantasy basketball in the past, maybe you're listening to Josh Lloyd over there on the Fantasy Basketball Podcast for Locked On. You know that sometimes there's sharks in the water. That if you run up against guys or gals in your league that are streaming teams that are just kind of piling on as many games as they can that week, it can make no sense for you. It's hard to put in the time. Sleeper has solved all this. It's a brand new way of playing fantasy basketball. It's called Game Picks. It's only available on the Sleeper app. You get to pick a single game per week. Your starters count for that game, and that's it. They make sure that you are playing the same number of games against all your opponents. It really levels the playing field. Still allows you to, use some strategy. You can still pick out the best game. You do need to do a little bit of homework here, but not nearly what you had to do in the past. You get player matchups. You can look at home and away. You can look at opponent defensive ranking, pace of play, so much more. It's all there in the Sleeper app. You're going to love Game Picks. You've been playing fantasy basketball, but you kind of were a little bit sick of the grind. Sleeper app is the way to go. Download the Sleeper app. Start a league with your friends today. You won't be disappointed. Download the Sleeper app today.
And of course, got to tell you about our friends over at SweatBlock. Everyone's had this experience. I'll just speak for myself. I struggle with sweating sometimes. I don't struggle with it. It happens very easily for me. That's why I use the doctor-recommended, doctor-created SweatBlock so that I can go ahead and have a simple solution to not having to worry about deodorant, antiperspirants, changing shirts multiple times throughout a meeting or a date, whatever the case may be. You can head over and try this out at sweatblock.com. It's the bestseller on Amazon for the past 10 years with over 13,000 reviews. When enough people are recommending it, you can trust that this has been crowdsourced, and it's actually currently #1 on Amazon antiperspirant category. It's also manufactured in the USA, which makes it a nice little tidbit to go ahead and feel like you're buying something that supports us here in the States. You can go ahead, if you know someone that this would be good for as well, you can recommend sweatblock.com, where if you head over there right now, you can get 20% off right now using promo code locked on, or at Amazon or CVS. That's promo code locked on. Check it out right now, sweatblock.com.
All right, Patty Mills, baby. This guy, we were already
Mr.
excited.
Pate.
we were already excited about Patty Mills coming to the Nets. Thought from a basketball perspective, it was just going to make a ton of sense. You always know it's a good signing when everyone else, other fans in the league and analysts too, just kind of I've said this before, but throw their hands up and they said the Nets got Patty Mills too. Like what the hell's going on here? Like now they get to add this guy to the roster, sort of like the perfect complement, exactly what they need. 6-man. Can put the ball on the deck if he needs to. We saw that during the Olympics. Didn't ask to get to do that a ton when he was with San Antonio. Also just can be a knockdown 3-point shooter at times. But I mean, this guy, in terms of personality, I already feel, and we can talk about some of the things he said and did at media day, but I already feel like he's not the leader of the team. But if there was one thing the Nets missed a little bit, I think last year was like a fun-loving nature. There's none of these guys are fun-loving. Right? They're not, and most superstars aren't, but no one's going to go and call James Harden, Kevin Durant, or Kyrie Irving like the most, just like silliest guys. They're not like anyone needs to be, but there really didn't seem to be a lot of people on the roster. I mean, DeAndre kind of had that glue piece to him. Mm-hmm. Don't you get the sense from Patty Mills right away that like, that's exactly what he's bringing? This kind of relaxed, joking around, all business when you need to, but this like lightness to him that maybe just comes from being maybe it's just an Australian thing. Maybe it's that he's just been in the league a long time and he just is very
we don't know.
Oh, the accent completely plays here. And so I think it's the whole thing. I just loved it. I couldn't get enough. I couldn't like watching every clip I could with this guy and everyone just absolutely nailed it. I feel like he's just going to be a total highlight on and off the court the whole season.
No, for sure. And I think, seeing a player from afar and having a sense of him. So it's all the things that I think allows him to be relaxed and calm and seem like, hey, here we are. Now I'm here to do it in Brooklyn is because he has so much experience. And I think that maybe it is the international, the Australian piece of it, that his confidence has certainly grown over his NBA career as well, because he's able to flex different muscles in that avenue as opposed to what he's asked to do at the NBA level and with the San Antonio Spurs. But the guy clearly gets basketball. He clearly gets the role that he's here to fill. He kind of branched it out in a lot of different directions as far as what he thinks he's capable of, what he'll be allowed to do. Sean Marks mentioned that as well. Yeah, there's nothing about it, man. At the time of the signing, I thought that this was absolutely what the Nets needed. Somebody that was going to be able to handle the role that was asked of him, step up for certain games if needed, and be relied upon in the locker room to be whether it's a little bit lighter, whether it's a little bit of a focal point for some of the things when you get in some of these rough patches and you don't know if Kevin Durant or Harden are going to be those vocal leaders necessarily. Like Patty Mills is going to serve all those little roles that you expect a veteran player to bring to a championship caliber team. And the quick footnote is when you talked about quotes from him, just as far as why he's here, this I think also just, it rings the bell, right? There were a number of reasons I'm here, but the main one was the conversation with Kevin. That's a two-way street there. It's awesome that Patty Mills took what Kevin Durant said, obviously, but that Kevin Durant is the guy that's talking with free agents and explaining to them what he wants to accomplish here and why they should be joining them.
Yeah, it was awesome. He talked about the role that Durant played and help sort of convince him to come there. It had a lot to do with the professionalism around the game and sort of the focus that they were going to have as a team that was able to help convince Mills to come to the Nets, because he had a lot of suitors. This was a guy from a championship level piece. This was a guy that most teams wanted to add. At the dollar number that he was coming in on and the skill set that he brings, his skill set plays for anyone trying to win now. And so because he's versatile, like I said, he's a professional in terms of, we talked about this last season, but the one of the upsides of bringing in so many veterans is you don't need to go through the learning curve with them. A lot of the stuff is known already. We saw this with Blake. We saw this briefly with Aldridge. We're going to see it with Millsap. Probably see this to some degree with James Johnson as well. And so with Mills, he just played high caliber basketball for many years, even though the last couple of years with the Spurs weren't, but this guy's played in crunch time games, big games already. You don't need to teach him anything new. He's going to be able to fit your system. And when he hears the piece about Kevin Durant coming to him and saying, like, because I'm sure he's getting sold like this from every team. So the fact that Durant could come in and convince him based on the focus and the professionalism and what exactly they're going to bring, it just added that final, I already felt great about the signing, and hearing that just made it I mean, I didn't need any more convincing, but it was the cherries were spilling over the sundae, basically.
Well, it's 3-point shooting. That's I'm very interested to see. That's not even like the biggest part of his game, obviously, but when you look at his percentages, that's going to be, it's very tantalizing to me when I look at that and I think about who's on this team and what it's going to look like potentially on the offensive end of things. But the piece about Kevin Durant too is we were talking about personalities the whole entire media week and just around this team in general. This is also from the standpoint of, you could walk into a room and want to have somebody who is just talking about all the exciting glitz and glamour aspect of things, right? All the off the court stuff. And that could appeal to a certain athlete, maybe a young guy coming in or whatever it may be. The fact that when you hear these guys have this conversation, my assumption is Kevin Durant is like, here's what we're doing on the court. Like, here's what we like to run. Here's how you're going to fit in. This is why it's going to be good for you. I'm sure a lot of other players are also talking that way to Patty Mills, but there's probably, name someone better amongst the suitors than Kevin Durant to be explaining to you, look at what I just did. Look at what I did in the Olympics. I'm going to be doing that all season long. And I want you to be one of the number one beneficiaries of where my mind is right now coming into this season. I think that if that doesn't sell you, like, I don't know what else would, beyond obviously getting back underneath Sean Marks as your GM. And that has to be a 1-to-1 for Patty.
He did talk about
how could you not?
He talked about how much he loved the coffee shops in Brooklyn too. So it was a little geographical thing.
Kevin Durant certainly is a nice player. He's a nice player. I think Patty used quotes at the press conference. He's a nice player in quotes, but the coffee. Now that's chef kiss, my friends. You don't get that in San Antonio.
I wasn't kidding. He did mention the coffee shops in Brooklyn.
No. I also, by the way, the piece about Greg Popovich from his time in San Antonio. I always that's just, you talk about, again, off the court stuff. They asked him, what will you take away from your time with Popovich? And he said, obviously all the basketball stuff. I learned a tremendous amount underneath him. And also the life perspective that Popovich gave to him about having a balance between what you're doing on the court and then experiences you have and growing your mind, changing the way you think about things. Like, I don't care. There's obviously talents on the court and you can disregard anything else that they're up to. But when I hear someone speak like that, it just means that, okay, this is also someone who is a bit of a cerebral individual as well and can think both in the context of a play-to-play basis and then the bigger picture, which speaks to the locker room piece and maybe managing personalities and helping players along the way throughout a season.
Yeah, and it makes sense that these guys, a lot of these guys come from this Spurs tree here at this point, right? It's like this all does kind of shake out around the limbs, that everyone.
Worst franchises to model yourself after, right?
Oh yeah, but that's what I mean. It's the reason they espouse all the right things in these talks is because they've really gotten an absolute masterclass in some of this stuff. Again, have the Spurs been a good team over the last couple of years? No, but there's no doubt.
They've been a good organization, though.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, you're getting all the playbook is there. They're using a lot of the same playbook, and I don't mean basketball. I mean like life playbook and sort of like top-down professional and personal playbook that has fit for so many players. And there's a reason there's a family atmosphere around the Spurs still. Like, you hear stories about Popovich going out to dinner with all the guys that he's ever played with. Like, whenever he comes into town, these are huge things. These are huge lifelong connections. And it seems like this is another piece of what they're trying to do here in Brooklyn, is taking a lot of these lessons and saying, this is how you maintain longevity in basketball. This is how you become not just a hired gun team that's just going to go out and sign some players for a couple of years. It's how you maintain decades worth of winning. And the Nets are already starting to put stuff like that in place, and Patty Mills is just a byproduct of that. He didn't start there. He had a great quote, by the way, about it was about him and Aldrige, like how they couldn't. Aldrige couldn't get rid of him. You couldn't shake him because they were together. They were together in Portland. Then they were played in San Antonio together, and then Aldrige, and then he and Aldrige are both there. They talk about couldn't shake him. So I thought that was just to put a cap on that. It was just another another reason.
By the way, like, isn't that a nice little extra bonus thing that Patty Mills has played with LaMarcus Aldridge, right? Like, they just played with one another. So whatever it's going to look like, we talk about chemistry, right? They're all going to get it. They're all veterans. They all get basketball. Also, these guys literally played with one another. How easy will that be to benefit from for the Nets?
Yeah, this is all from almost every box being checked. This is all really just lining up.
It's a gush fest. We got a gush fest. We did it. We got a gush
totally.
Fest.
And if you haven't gone to look at it, go and find some of the media drops he was doing at Media Day just for some of the local radio. It's awesome. It's just so funny because they're asking him to lead in different segments and stuff, and he's doing it and just making up nicknames for people already. It was really awesome. All right, do a little Nic Claxton talk here. to round out the show. First, got to talk to you about our friends over at Rock Auto. If you're trying to find car parts these days, you can go to the local place, but we said it before. All they're going to do is just type in the make and model of your car on their computer and then just go walk into the back and find the part you need. And it's going to be probably more than what you can just find on Rock Auto, who's all you have to do over there is type in the make and model of your car, and it's just going to give you a drop-down menu of the parts you need. And they're just going to ship it right out to you for 30 or even 50% better than that local place. There's just a total no-brainer at Rock Auto. They're just doing the same thing as the local place, except they're also a family business. They've been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. And you just know you're getting the best prices available. They have every single thing you need: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, new carpets, and so much more. Because, little hate to bury the lead here. There's a lot of parts for your car. Rock Auto has all of them. All you have to do at rockauto.com right now, you see all the parts available for your car and truck, and then you just write in "Locked On" in the "How did you hear about us" box. They'll know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com.
Oh, and friends, betonline.ag wants you to know they're back, and they're better than ever. All the eyes are on the gridiron, professional, collegiate, and it starts this football season well underway. We know the Giants, it's depressing. Don't worry about it. But as always, BetOnline is your number one spot for all the pro and college football action this season. With new updated site and interface, even more odds, props, and contests, betonline.ag continues to be the number one source for everything football. Head over to the website on your laptop or that mobile device to sign up today and receive your 100% welcome bonus. That's double your initial deposit just for signing up. Don't forget to use promo code NFL100. From football, basketball, boxing, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts, promo code Locked On. And so, my friend, as we knew we would, we've come to the point where we talk Nicolas Claxton. Here's a guy going around town, feeling good, sowing his oats, bulking up in the offseason. Maybe not. We're unsure. He's about to start knocking down triples, been working on the perimeter game. But also, in the spectrum of the media day, there was some interesting kind of messages that were getting put out between Sean Marks and then Nicolas Claxton himself. I'm going to read off this quick one here that came from Sean Marks when they were talking about not just with Jared Allen and then even with Nicolas Claxton early on. I think we've run into some problems with that in the past, talking about identifying where a player is going to be starting out the season. He's going to play in the G League, or he's going to do this, or he's going to do that. When all of a sudden we get a guy like, for instance, he mentions Rodion Kurucs in this, that ends up having a nice year, and you end up utilizing him on the active roster. So he's tepid on committing to it. Let's start there. Is this Sean Marks just waiting for it naturally to play out? Where is Nicolas Claxton headed for the G League potentially? Let's just start there. Like, we talked about what his role was going to be. Sure, he's a bench guy, but is it maybe going to be so crowded when you think about James Johnson, when you think about a Bembry, when Millsap and LMA? Like, is there just too many bodies? And Claxton is going to have to at least start the year for the Long Island Nets?
Well, he didn't seem, in his kind of talks, he didn't seem overwhelmingly confident that he was going to be seeing a lot of playing time. He didn't say it out loud, but and this is Claxton I'm talking about. Because you were reading the Marks. You were reading
that was Sean Marks on it.
Yeah.
Nicolas Claxton was, honestly, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm just coming in to work every day and trying to get better. Yeah, I would definitely be open to it when asking about, would you play for the Long Island Nets? If they want me to do that, I'll go down there and hoop it up and make the best out of the situation. So whatever the internal conversations are, Claxton is not, he's not, at the very least, he has eyes. He sees what they did. He doesn't feel confident that his role is as defined as it was even last season.
Yeah, this screams to me, these quotes from both of them. Claxton's are a little bit more telling to me than even Marx's. This screams to me of a guy who might be seeing the writing on the wall, which is there is, and we talk. Look, this is not for us. This is not new. We discussed this exact time crunch a few weeks ago on the podcast. We said that this was a definitive possibility, and judging by these quotes, it really feels like what's going to happen is there's just really no path to him playing a lot. We outlined this on a previous podcast. The cliff notes are there's just not enough minutes among the bigs, and you cannot play these guys. You can't play a lot of these bigs together in the way the Nets want to play basketball. And so when you just factor in those two truths, what you end up with short of injuries to multiple players, there's just not enough minutes to have good, meaningful time on the court for him in terms of development. And then the next question you have to ask yourself is, if we're trying to develop this guy and we can't do it at the NBA level, then there's only one other spot, and that's the G League. And so I'm not saying he's going to play a lot in the G League, but the fact that it's even being entertained by both of them seems to me that it's like been discussed at least. And it could just end up being logistics and say, hey man, if you want to play, this is the way to play. Because when you have LaMarcus Aldridge, when you have Blake Griffin, when you have Paul Millsap, when you have James Johnson who can play small ball 5, when you have these guys on your team, when you have even Kevin Durant who can play a small ball 5, if you really want to go small, and have shooters.
if you want to do what
that's what I mean. Like
just just guys that can do other things that you normally would occupy.
At some point, there's just no more minutes, and this to me feels, if you're a Nic Claxton fan, which we are, the writing on the wall seems to me that we are not going to see, at least to start, we are not going to see much of any of Nic Claxton on the court.
So I have a bigger picture question, but quickly, remember, he's a guy that's up for a $50+ million extension.
Well, he's not getting that, so I'll tell you.
Right, and that maybe that very much feels like it's going to be the case. It's interesting to think about where he was last year, and again, when you traded Jared Allen, he goes on to be $100 million man, right? And we agree, get great value, etc. But these talking points, at the very least, diminishes the idea of, what if someone came knocking about Nic Claxton? Like, if you're saying, and you could say championship room and the roster and you look around there, but if the talent's good enough, he finds a spot for himself. So that's just an interesting footnote. The bigger picture thing for me is, do you think that, go back a couple of seasons now, that they traded Jared Allen because that worked out, but that kind of maybe came a little bit out of nowhere in terms of being able to get James Harden, and that becomes a part of that. So all of a sudden, Nicolas Claxton starts playing more basketball for you than maybe you ever anticipated. Like, the idea may have been to slowly bring this kid along. He's still incredibly young. He's younger than some draft picks from this year. So is this just maybe that byproduct of, if the Nets had done it perfectly for themselves, they would have just had him developing in the background, not using him for stretches. But instead, you had DeAndre Jordan. The opportunity for Harden comes up. Now you are thin at the 5, and you thrust him into this role. He showcases some really nice skill sets, especially defensively. But inside the organization, the shot piece that we talked about when he first came in, we said supposedly he can shoot from the outside a little bit. Maybe that was the thing that the Nets wanted to develop with him before he even sniffed the NBA court.
Yeah, look, Nets fans get really excited about the flashes we've seen from Claxton at times, right? The perimeter defense, to be able to switch, that kind of stuff. Times where he was paired with Harden, the lob stuff. It's all there from him. It's easy to forget. Like, you mentioned the age. He's still super young. He's 22. He's played fewer than 800 total basketball minutes in his career.
Has had injuries as well. Yeah,
he's had a bunch of injuries. He didn't play a ton. And then he was sort of buried at times also. Fewer than 800 minutes. Like, he's played 47 total basketball games at low minutes for his career. We've really not seen that much of him. And so he's just,
and you could make the case that last season, some of the holes in his game were more exposed because
I was just going to say, he's super raw. I was going to say he's just a super raw player still. He is not anywhere close to a polished big. Like, compared to the Jared Allen, only in the sense that they kind of both played the 5. Jared Allen had many more things going for him at this point. He was bigger. He was much stronger, right? He had already had the good finishing stuff where he couldn't be bodied off the rim. Like, he had a lot more going from him than Nic Claxton did at this point. Their games are a little different, but they're not really total comps, except they were bigs that played for the Nets, right? Like, their games were not decidedly different, but they're definitely different. And so, I think the thing that happens to Nic Claxton is that Nets fans, rightfully so, get super excited about the potential, but Nets really at this point aren't in potential mode. They're in championship mode. And so when that's the case, development is just not what happens. Now, if you want, are they going to try to shop him later? His trade value is much lower than Jared Allen's too. So this is all to say, just to round this idea back out, is to say that what we've heard so far about him between Marks and his own quotes at Media Day, it does not sound like we are going to be seeing a ton of him to start the season. Again, things happen, but to start the year, I'd be shocked if he played at all.
No, he's right there with Day'Ron Sharpe, I think, right? And that it's weird to think about them the same way, but you mentioned 22 years old. It's Nicolas Claxton and Day'Ron Sharpe developing potentially for the future. Like that it's a weird sentence to say about Nicolas Claxton. It makes all the sense in the world about a Day'Ron Sharpe, but here we are. And we're a fan of Nic Claxton. I'll still say I'm a little bit surprised if this is where it goes, because I thought the defensive piece of it was enough to have value for this roster. But as we've said throughout this episode, when you think about the way it fits in with the superstars, the style of basketball they want to play, it's not the same, but they played for the Nets. DeAndre Jordan, you can't be good at a couple of things or one thing and then have these weird holes that impact how we do everything else. It's the same thing with Nic Claxton. You can be really good switching on defense and grabbing some rebounds and getting out and running the floor, but the fact that you struggle setting screens and helping run and facilitate the offense on that end, the fact that you don't have a mid-range shot or anything else other than at the rim, that value, that equation ends up looking like we get LMA to come back, we sign Paul Millsap, and we bring in other players that round this out in a better way.
And he's simply not big enough to guard huge other guys on the other end of the court too, either, right? So it's like, so it ends up becoming this thing. It's like, we can't guard opposing centers and he can't really punish them either. And so when that becomes, at least on the offensive end, when that becomes the case too, he becomes sort of like a man without a nation, right? When it comes to where he can land. So, I don't want this to be the case. We love Nic Claxton. I want to see him develop more. I think there's a lot more potential in his game. We just might not see it happen, at least right away this season.
And the last thing that I'll say on it is, to your point, like I want to see more Nic Claxton. I want all Nic Claxton. I also don't want to sour on Nic Claxton because he's being tasked to do more than he's capable of right now. Sure. And that's the other thing that I think would certainly happen. If you got him out there and offensively it didn't quite look like it was coming together great, then it would be, what are you doing with this kid out there? Get him all, whatever. And you start to turn on what is a great young player. You just got to let him work on his game and see what it turns into. So it's a step back in general, but it can still be a good thing for Nic Claxton in the big picture down the road.
All right, we're going to, I think that pretty much wraps up the media day stuff. Again, tons of guys gave quotes. Most of them were pretty
Joe Harris will not be cutting his hair anytime soon. Other big takeaway.
Oh, dude, from a guy who would do dirty, disgusting crimes to get his hair back. I'm all for that. You grow that hair as long as you want to. I would. I'll tell you off air the things I'd be willing to do to be able to grow my hair back.
Disgusting crimes really.
I mean, it wouldn't be like X-rated or anything like that. I'm just saying that, like,
I didn't think that was the case either, Doug. But then you mentioned that. You see, you're painting a picture here. You're painting a picture.
All right. Dirty. You're disgusting. All right, we're gonna get out of here.
Run my hands through my hair here and think about.
I've dreamed about it, buddy. I've dreams about it. In my younger days, it was Joe Harris like, and I can still, when I dream of a head full of flowing locks. All right, we're gonna get out of here. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. All these episodes are going up on YouTube. We got a lot of fun things planned for the year too. Game night stuff on YouTube. Going live at certain times. We're going to be fielding comments all season long as well. That's a really good place to just kind of jump into a conversation. YouTube, just in a way that most podcasting platforms don't have this. YouTube does. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Every single episode and more is going up over there. All you got to do is search Locked On Nets on YouTube, or you can just go down into the show notes because I will leave the link there. Subscribe to Locked On Nets over on YouTube.
By Zeus's beard, it's almost the Brooklyn Nets season. Amended Ron Burgundy.
Oh, one of the all-time great Ronald Burgundy, one of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.